Okay, so here we are. We're on air. Finally. So it's the long-awaited return of myself and Ken O'Neill, and we're going to be talking about something that's really pretty, as we always say, cool. And it's a big secret, a big plus to improving anybody's type of fighting training, their ability to respond quickly to any sort of violence or unknown. And I don't really want to give away too much, but we've been having a little preliminary talk before we went on air, covering a lot of things because we haven't talked in a while. But as usual, we don't really follow a script, and we do a lot of tangents. But you get a lot of good information out of this, and that's what I hear from people, that they pick up a lot of tidbits from us, Ken, and that they also ask a lot of questions. Like I was saying before, that's other people had asked about Jay D'Amato again. That's why I was bringing that up. But so overall, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to talk about the aspect that you're not going to pick up, that people don't cover at the boxing gyms, the kickboxing gyms, at the traditional martial arts places, MMA places. They don't do this. And how would you frame this? What would you call this area? Or you do have a name for it because you're going to be doing a workshop on it, and we'll be talking about that too. So
yeah, to me, this is the biggest missing link in almost all training. I just had a buddy of mine who's he's actually one of my best friends. In fact, the house I'm sitting in right now is a duplex in Richmond Heights, a suburb of St. Louis City. I mean, I'm only 100 feet from the borderline of the city. I'm barely in St. Louis County, near Forest Park, where the big zoo and everything is. That's why we train out there a lot in warm weather, because it's like a mile from my little studio here. But where I was going with this is the guy that I co-own this duplex with is a guy named Greg, who I've known for. Greg was a Muay Thai student of Ron Smith's back in the old CMAA while I was doing my thing. Greg and I hit it off. He's also a crackerjack top line HVAC business owner, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning guy. He's really, really brilliant in that. So anyway, that's a side note. But Greg was an airborne ranger. He was 101st Airborne. He was a ranger. A lot of great training. Greg has always tried to keep it real. He's got a mentality of he likes martial stuff, but he only likes martial stuff that's clean and clear and works. Okay. So this ties into your question. I'm answering your question in a slightly long-winded way because he's kind of inadvertently one of my research guys. What Greg's been doing is, for a few years now, is looking at programs around the country that have what I'm going to call the missing link right now in this reality training. And so far, he's only found one place that addresses what I'm going to talk about here in a second. And it's actually SIG Arms, Sig Sauer, SIG Arms.
Yeah.
They put together a training course, and they were doing this down in Oklahoma. And I'll mention briefly what they do. And this ties into what I'm talking about, because it's hard to find anybody that's addressing this. There's this whole nebulous missing area, and that area is what I would call the virtually instant evaluation assessment phase in situations that if you're only using conscious linear thought, you'll be dead. This is a combination of strategic, I'll say planning training, blended with your spontaneous intuitive abilities that you can't teach in a very technical, specific way, like you can teach a guy how to perfectly form a fist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this is in this nebulous area where it's process work. It's process work. You have to put people through a type of process and lead them to make certain kinds of discoveries that you could never teach in an exact linear progression. Okay. So what Greg found in this one particular SIG Arms course was the only thing that we've ever been able to find that addresses this at all, where they put you in situations and you have to evaluate on the spot what's going on? Is this something that you, and by the way, this particular course, some of it was empty hand, zero distance work, as you would call it. Some of it was in that range and just slightly beyond where they were doing knife work. And then in the next one was in this course, which I love this would be what they would call their more extreme long range, which was more like 6 to 8 feet away when you go to the gun. But I like that because they kept their ranges real and they kept their evaluative assessment processing work all in these ranges of 0 to, you know, a little further out with the knife to just a little further out at gun range. And this is the thing that people aren't doing. And this is the thing that I'm addressing in this workshop is, and luckily there's going to be 2 neat things that happen. And some of this I'm going to end up putting up on YouTube afterwards, and then we'll talk about it as we discuss. But I'll have 2 cops in there that are extremely street experienced. One of them's been a student of mine since he was 16, and he's about almost 50 now. The other one was a student of Jay's first, and then started training with me too, a guy named Steve Pinkerton, who's a 1st District South City police officer, who inadvertently, you know, they use Steve in a way that's kind of interesting because his abilities and his attributes are really high, and his training, all right? He's got a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background too, not only through the Hickson Gracie approach through Jay, but also he went and trained out with a Brazilian that came here to St. Louis, a guy named Boggy, and trained with him for years as well, plus doing all the stuff we do. And then he's got the JKD mentality of how to break things down, how to analyze them, how to make them work, how to make cops able to use this stuff and functionalize it without having to train stuff, you know, every day for 30 years. He works at several police academies, including the one here in St. Louis, because he does effective things that are getting great reviews by cops in the field who are having to use it. And now we get into the core thing of what I'm talking about in this evaluative nebulous phase. The words that the police call it is gun retention, okay? And that's that, you know, you're in this scuffle and here's the gun, and how do you keep the bad guy from getting the gun? Now, to me, that's just a metaphor or an example of that whole evaluative instant phase that happens before the stuff goes physical. And this is what people aren't training. They're not talking about this. This SIG Arms place was the closest thing we've ever been able to find to anybody doing it. Even Asymmetrics, this big place here in Missouri now, run by ex-Navy SEALs that teach combat shooting and this and that. And they even have some empty hand stuff. They have a little bit of knife stuff. I'm going to go through their course here pretty soon. Greg and I are going to go through it together, but the same thing's missing. Okay. Now, wait a minute. It's like, all right, time out. You got all these freaking people. Now, don't get me wrong. My whole thing is not focused on guns at all, but it's an important part of it because it's one of the things that's coming up out here on the street right now is people carry a weapon. They might be great with the weapon itself, but how about their fast ability to judge and evaluate all these funny little things that if they didn't have the weapon wouldn't even be an issue, right? How they're even positioning them. Okay, case in point, one of the most common fights around here on the street is a fender bender, an accident. Bam! Guys all torqued up. 2 guys crash, right? Everybody's torqued up. Guy gets out of the car. This happens all the time, right? Guy gets out of the car, comes walking at you. Okay, you're Mr. Concealed Carry now. You got your piece, all right? At least you're smart enough. You've got some kind of blousy enough clothing that make it hard to see. But because you never think about this in your training, you don't think about the fact is, you know, you're getting a little amped up. The guy's coming at you. He's getting closer. He's close. He starts the classic pushing thing, and you're not, you know, you could so easily deal with that, and you're not trained, and you're backing up, and the guy's pushing you, and you do this. Your jacket opens. He sees the gun. Now he just amps up from a level 2 to like a level 50 because he's like, oh shit, this guy's got a gun. Now he's going for the gun because he wants to make sure you don't go for the gun. So all of a sudden there's this whole new problem solving thing that happens on the spot due to the fact that you're packing. All right. And so I'm saying if you're packing a weapon, you need to know how to deal with this phase right here because this is the one that people don't talk about. They don't talk about this part. And so now we're into what the cops have to deal with, because their gun's out there. It's open carry. Bad guys go for the gun all the time when they're afraid, right? So, and they do gun retention training to retain their weapon so that the bad guy doesn't get it. So in a sense, I like that as a metaphor for this gigantic phase of what we're going to do in this workshop, which is the whole problem of how you position yourself, not only physically, but mentally, physically, and emotionally, changes the potential outcomes dramatically. I'll sidestep on that a little. Here's a case in point. Here's another way people are getting taken down all the time. I don't know how much this is where you're at over in Thailand or when you're in Cambodia or whatever, but around here, here's how people used to walk down the street kind of like this. You know how they walk down the street now? They walk down the street like this now. With the goddamn phone. And they're not watching anything. Man, I think I'm going to become a criminal because none of these fools are paying any attention to anything. First of all, you can get their 700 or 800. This is my brand new Galaxy S9 here. You can get their nice expensive phone like a microsecond. They could be a top level professional football player, and you'll have their phone, and you can run down the street and dodge between buildings. They'll never get you. I mean, it's a good time to be a criminal because people are walking around with their head up their phone, so to speak. Yeah. All right. So I'm just trying to kind of paint the whole idea in practical terms of what our key focus is on what we're dealing with in this workshop. And it's going to be interesting and it's going to be fun because what I predict is going to happen are a couple of interesting things. One thing that we're going to do is I'm going to put the cops on the spot, and they're going to lay out for everybody, and we're going to act these scenarios out, right, of very common things that they're seeing on the street right now. And this is one of them, all right? This weapon retention issue. Carjackings, there's still tons of those going on, but there's all this stuff happening that it's good to take common examples of what's going on and put people in the situations. Now, what we don't do is give them a prescribed course of action. Now, I'm going to give one big thing away here. The way I qualify my approach, and this is what got the St. Louis City Police Academy, and to this day, there's still guys from there that still refer me for this reason. I backed up my approach with a study that the FBI did, and the report came out in 1986. And it was the danger of giving confrontational, and I'll add in a word in parentheses here, prescribed courses of action for any event. It does not work. It fails every time. And if you don't believe me, you go to the local YMCA or YWCA or community center, and Joe Schmo has his, they always like to, women's self-defense course or self-defense course or whatever. And you'll go in there and they're all giggle-assing around and they're all grabbing each other's wrists and, oh, I got out. I have a buddy that I really pissed off who's an Aikido guy. I pissed him off one time, who created this fancy defensive tactics program, and he goes out and sells it to hurt nurses and hospitals. He goes, what do you think of that? And I'm like, I think you probably should be arrested for teaching that crap, because he's doing the same thing. We're going to do a technique A versus response B and all that shit. It don't work that way. It just doesn't work. But what I've learned that you can do is you can put, and like I said, this FBI study really backs me up on this. This was like, they did tons of case studies on this. What you can do, though, is you can put people in a process, okay? And then as they're doing the process and they're failing, you can give them examples of a different, quick way to see things. Part of it's having a mentality of cleverness. Part of it's being a mentality of how you're positioning your body, what you're doing with your awareness, and how you're being a sneaky, clever bastard that is able and ready to cut stuff off before it has a chance to get to the point where you're in a strength versus strength, heavy duty skill versus skill fight, okay? Because that's what you don't want to do, right? I tell people, I go, look, man, when you're in these real deals, you don't know shit about the other person. This one might be some fat freaking slob sitting on the bench in the Metrolink car next to you, and you'll assume he can't do anything. Well, you could be deadly wrong, right? I mean, we just talked about this a little while ago. There's some huge boys out there there's a lot of fat, and under that fat, some of these guys can still move. You can't judge people as much as you think you can all the time by looking at them. So you just have to assume that these guys are full of PCP and they're super athletes underneath the blubber. You know, it's the only safe thing to assume, right? So
Hey,
you know.
if Phil Big Head is listening, we're not talking about you though, Phil. We're not talking about you. You're not one of those guys we're worried about. You just are a big pile of blubber. So
oh man, blow.
Just so he doesn't, you know, because I know he'll try to pass it off. You guys were talking about me. No, we weren't, Phil. No. So anyway, not to detract you, but I just want to make that clear because I know what he'll do if he watches this. So anyway.
Well, to go off of that, what I have to say then is actually the guy I was thinking of is a chiropractor who walked into the California Martial Arts Academy, and I don't want to frame him the way I just framed this make-believe guy, but I'll just put it this way. This guy was a big boy, okay? And he's a chiropractor and going to school in Texas, and I think he switched to Logan here in St. Louis. But he walks in our school, and this guy's heavy, and he's a chunky guy and big, right? And we're talking, and I'm thinking, the guy's like, he's a martial art guy, and I'm thinking, okay, that's cool and this and that. But here was the interesting thing. This defied physics, right? The guy's a ninja guy. And I'm thinking, okay, all right, you know. And I do know a few. I knew Stephen Hayes, and that guy did have some very legitimate skills and was a very cool guy. I was in a camp that he was one of the instructors in when I brought all that to the St. Louis U campus when I first met Jay. But what this guy did is the classic Japanese outward wrist lock, kotagash, right? He says, well, let me show you what I mean about how we train. It's unique. I go, okay. We're standing in front of a glass case that has a bunch of weapons and stuff for sale in it, right? So I grabbed his wrist and I cranked that thing on there. This huge guy in an area that's maybe a 3 to 4 foot circle goes straight airborne, flips in the air, lands in a nice, very curved position on his back, rolls up out of that and jumps up on his feet. Now, I would have been impressed if an 80-pound guy did that, and this big boy did that. So that's a case in point of what I'm talking about, and that's the guy I was thinking, Brian something, of you gotta not go, oh, this guy's a fat slob, I'm not worried about him, and next thing you know, there's a fucking knife that's just got buried in your gut, you know, because you didn't think he could be that quick, or he looked like a schmuck, you know. So anyway, that being said, I'm just trying to frame a little bit of the general idea of what we're approaching.
Yeah. Well, I can add a lot to that because actually what we use in the military as definition for zero distance, it just means any time that you're not in carbine range. So anything that's inside of carbine range, which can be they're trying to get to the pistol. You know, they're trying to get to the pistol, and maybe they're shooting the pistol. But as you know, you can rush a pistol pretty effectively, actually.
Yeah.
So zero distance is actually weapons too. It's just that it's you're going to be ending up close. You know, I mean that's the difference. It doesn't mean zero distance doesn't mean it's only here. It means it ends up there, but it can start out at where you cannot get shot effectively without dropping people. So there's a lot there. I mean, that's urban stuff. And what you're talking about as far as that goes is putting people, it's a situational training is what it is. You're putting in a situation. And which reminds me, because we were talking about Star Trek, and that's that Kobayashi Maru test. Remember when it was, well, Picard. I think, didn't they say Picard? Or no, it was Kirk, right? Kirk's the one that cheated at they called it cheating. And Kobayashi Maru, where it's supposed to be a fail. You're put in a situation where you're going to fail. You're surrounded and stuff, and you guys can people can, I'm not going to cover it all, but you can look it up with the Kirk solution for that. But this it's the same thing. And the same thing, like in our JKD training, the way that Mike Sandlin trained was to put you in situations like that. There were not specific answers. You came up with the answer, and
right.
yeah, you came up with the answer. And what you were being trained to do was to problem solve. And that's what I've said for 20 years, that we were more than 20 years, that we were problem solvers. You know, that was always the difference between us. The combat JKD branch was always problem solvers. We weren't people trying to apply patterns, which is what the other JKD Kali Silat Muay Thai guys were trying to do. They were trying, and you still see people trying to do that. We don't do that. We didn't do that in that aspect. And what I do and what I've done with the military is also the same thing. There are certain, just like shooting, like you're trying to solve the problem by you'll end up shooting somebody. The same thing. There's certain things that we do, like in combat judo, for example. There's a battle plan. There is a battle plan, but your exact tactics will change. You're not following. You have the strategy remains the same, but the tactics change, and that's how warfare is done. Same thing if you're playing chess. You know, you're trying to put the other person in checkmate, but the way that you do that varies against the opponent that you're playing in a given circumstances that develop in the game. That's what makes the game difficult and interesting. And that's the same thing you and I are talking about. And actually, there are people who are doing it. I mean, not to negate that, because I do all that research. Even the Dog Brothers have done that with part of their gun stuff that they do. The gun guys are trying to do that. This is one of the things I'm offering to gun guys, is to solve that. There's a tactical gap. What you're talking about there between the handgun, and there's too many people who want to believe in a fantasy that I have a gun. That, well, you have a guitar. Does that make you Jimi Hendrix? You know what I mean? No, it doesn't make you Jimi Hendrix. You're not. You know, you're not Jimmy Page either. You have to practice, and you have to be trained by people who know what they're doing. You know, and nobody has a gun 24/7. I don't care what anybody in the United States thinks. They are not driving everywhere with a gun. And you can't travel. So if you want to live at home inside of a shelter, then you can try to act superior. But if you're not going to do that, you're not going to have a gun. And if you keep it in a safe and all this stuff, you get someone suffers a home invasion, you're not going to get to that gun. You need to have the skills to get to the gun or to get to the knife. So there's a lot of things that we do. In fact, the best way, I think, to get people to understand it, the thing that they can grasp, is the John Wick movies, because the John Wick movies, they show him totally different than like Jason Bourne or whatever.
Yeah.
And here's a free thing for everybody. John Wick is always trying to shoot people. He is always trying to shoot people. He wants to shoot you. The only reason he does anything else when he throws people or hits them is because he wants to get to his gun. He either wants to get it, he wants to get the other guy off his gun, or he wants to get to his gun. Everything he's doing, his whole purpose is to shoot you. And so what you're seeing is really a very realistic idea. Now, some of the moves that he uses are not realistic, but the whole, your first time you've ever seen this in the movies, really, where you're seeing his purpose is to shoot you. You get in his way or whatever, he's going to throw you. He's going to hit you so that he can get to his gun. He's not going to hit you just to keep hitting you, which is what you'll see in Jason Bourne or a bunch of other things. He's always trying to shoot you. I mean, and if he's got a knife, the knife scenes are bad in the movie. I'll just say that. And if they have a problem with that, put me in there as the guy. I'll give you better knife scenes. He's using a knife only to get to the gun. Everything is to get to the gun. That's it. And there's a tactical gap. And the gun guys know that, because they know that in a lot of stuff is urban, meaning that you're not shooting at paper targets at 100 feet or more. You're shooting at stuff that's within, like we're talking, 10 feet, 10 to 15 feet. And people are going to close. They're going to close on you. And especially if you've got multiple people, if like you were in the riots like we were talking about, and you just can't pull a gun and start shooting people either. That's another fallacy that U.S. people live by. You can't do that. You cannot do, you can't, just because you're scared, you can't shoot. Cops try to get away with that, which I think that's going to come to an end at some point. But the normal non-cop can't just say, I was scared, and start shooting everybody. You cannot do that. There's got to be more than you being scared to justify anything you do. And I don't want to get into legal stuff because every place is different. I don't live in the United States. Every country is different. But what I'm going to tell you is there's a tactical gap is universal. That tactical gap, I don't care where you are in the world, that's going to be there. You have got to be able to fight your way to the gun or fight your way to retain the gun, which is what you're talking about, which is, years ago, cops wanted me to teach them gun retention skills, and it also goes to exactly what type of gun you're carrying, where you're carrying that gun, because we have to change how we do things. It's like, but the plan stays the same. The tactics change, which is going to sound esoteric to people who don't have an idea about what we do. But people who go to kickboxing, boxing gyms, MMA stuff, they're not going to understand this because they've never been acquainted with this, and the guys that train them don't know anything about this. They don't know a thing about this aspect. And so, I mean, there are a few people who know about this. There are some people doing, that's what the military, this is exactly what I do in the military, although I try to get it so that they don't have to get to the gun, that they can get rid of the guy by themselves, whether they have a coconut or or whatever. I mean, that's what I deal with the worst situations. Like they can't get it. They're room clearing. They're coming in, someone busts out of the closet or something. They can't get the M4 up, and they can't get the M4 up. They're not going to make it to the 9 that they're carrying, So what do they do? And a lot of people they're going to get locked into that mode that you and I know very well. They're going to try to keep getting the M4 up, as they're getting the hell beat out of them, or maybe stabbed to death. Although if they're wearing a plate carrier, they're safer. But I mean, you're still vulnerable. So there's other things. I mean, I have to train them to immediately forget about the M4 and go for, like, that's why I always tell them carry the blade here. It's like I'm here. That's why I like T-handle knives, because boom, you let go of that and you're already curing your problem. Wow, am I giving out free training right there, people? That's it. I'm not going to give out any more. That's it. Huge. And MMA guys could never have taught you that, telling you that they don't know any of that stuff. So this aspect, though, by the way, we talked a little bit about your work. When is the workshop? You said you got one slot open, right? You got one slot open or not?
It's filled now, and I'm overfilled. Now I have overflow already.
Oh, really?
I have an overflow list, yeah. So
you're going to put another one, though, right? You're going to
yeah, if I get enough people already, I think, because I'm giving little tidbits away in my regular classes, and I told these guys, I says, doing this one time is enough to get you to think out of the box. And I said, I can tell you right now, there's going to be a lot of, okay, I get it now. All right. And then really, and I'm thinking of this from a perspective of how this affected with Mike doing something that gave me the idea for this over the years. I think that if a person probably did this 5 or 6 times within a year, they would have this process work somatically wired enough that, and I shouldn't have just said somatically, but it's because it's a weird combination of a certain kind of mindset combined with some differences somatically, that they would be more prepared to deal with unpredictability in situations. And I'm not just talking about combative situations either. I've noticed, for me developing this over the years, that it's helped me strategically handle all kinds of crazy confrontations, almost most of which were never physical. It's a process, okay? So, but I think a half a dozen times within a year repeated would really have you there, and you wouldn't lose it because you're not memorizing patterns about anything. And this still trips people's triggers, like what, you know. But once they do it, they get it. They get it, you know. So it's and it's a very what's the word I'm looking for? It's a very it's a wake-up call. It's an experience that makes you go, oh. And I started to say this earlier and I dropped it because I was trying to explain an idea where this comes from. And that is this. What I've seen of doing this over the years going back is a lot of the guys that'll fail the most are the guys that have had the most training with repetition-oriented kinds of sport arts. Just like I mentioned, what built a lot of Jay's school that I ran back in the 80s was these guys coming in who were, you know, a lot of known guys, 3rd and 4th degree black belt guys on down, who got their tails whipped in a simple bar fight because what's burned into them, their training is, I'm on a mat, there's rules, I always have room to throw my blindingly fast high kick to your head, you know, my reverse punch and all that stuff. That is zero usefulness when you're between a bunch of tables and the edge of a bar and a bunch of people and a bunch of scattered chairs and shit. That's out the window. And these guys get their ass kicked and come in with their tail dragging. Well, somebody told me you guys work a lot closer range with, like, you know, and that's what I'm talking about, is a big mentality shift and actually a strategic process approach where you learn how to be very clever, very quick. But it's almost like playing games in scenarios. You learn how to, and I'll do some of this myself because guys always get a kick out of the crazy shit that I do in these situations. But sometimes when they see somebody else that's already there, it's like they absorb the lesson right away. And they go, oh, and I hear that. I'll hear that and I'll laugh because I'll hear 10 guys in the back, guys and gals going, oh, you sneaky old bastard. I kind of get what you're doing now. And they absorb the lesson. And this is a lot of how the process works. You put them in scenarios. And then it's fun because these street cops I have that are been with me for years and they're in a lot of stuff. They'll say, oh, here's this thing. It's like these bad guys talk and they get ideas. And it's like this, you see these same kinds of things get repeated on public transportation and the way these guys are working now. I not long ago in a fairly rough part of the north part of the city. I guess this has gotten around in these little gangs and they'll work in groups of 3s, right? And they'll set these things up on street corners. Here comes the guy probably doing this, walking around the corner, not paying any attention. The first guy approaches. Hey, man, you got a cigarette? Hey, man, and they'll carry empty gas cans. This is a good one. Stan and I saw this one ourselves just having dinner not long ago. I've seen it a million times. Hey, man, my car just broke down. My pregnant wife's in the car. I got to get her to the hospital. I've even heard this a few times now. So they share stories on how to set you up. So the guy's got the gas can right, and he's walking up, and he's got you all distracted. Okay, buddy number 2 was in an entranceway to a store door, just kind of hanging out, doing this, right? You didn't even pay attention to him. Now he's right on your back, okay? While this guy's engaging you and you're focused on him now, his buddy's right behind you. He's standing about 2 feet behind you, still pretending like he's on his phone so you don't think he's doing anything. And buddy number 3 is at another bushwhacker angle, walking across the street, but being even careful enough to veer at an angle so you don't even think he's headed your direction. Then all of a sudden, either the guy starts yelling at you because you won't give him any money, or he catches you when you're going for the wallet. Wham! The guy behind drops you. He cold cocks you fast so that the guy in front's not even hardly at any risk at all. And by the time you're struggling, now guy number 3, now he's in on you too, and they're beating you down, and then they rob you and beat you good. I just gave away one right there that I know happens a lot. I know a male nurse that this just happened to. Big athletic guy, and that guy was in the hospital for 2 weeks. 2 weeks in the hospital these days is a long time. That means you are effed up. Effed up. They hurt this guy, kicking him in the head, and you know.
Yeah, that's and that goes back to something that we could talk. I mean, I don't know. Training with Mike, all that stuff was covered. I mean, that was part of the whole that was part of the whole thing, you know, and I've taught people, tried to teach people that, and they're like, well, I don't want to go around and thinking like that. Well, all right, then you're going to become a victim at some point because you're vulnerable, you know. And I mean, I'll give away a lot of secrets in here, but I'll give out this one. As always, assume you're going to get attacked by everybody. Then you're not going to have a problem, you know. And I won't give out the second part of that, but I'll give out the first part. Always think that you're going to be attacked, and every person that comes up to you, that tries to talk to you, that crosses your path, that gets to an angle to you, or there's 2 or 3 people, always think they're going to attack you. You know, that's the first part. Then I've been in situations where I guarantee people wanted to attack me, but they didn't because they realized I knew that I wasn't going to be vulnerable. You know, and I used to go test that out. In fact, I mean, I went through a period where I would go around to bad places and test that stuff out. I was in Detroit. I was in inner city Kansas City. I was in LA, in Denver. I was also obviously in East St. Louis, which you know how that was. I mean, that's where I was training. You know, that's where I was training, and with Mike. And I went through a period where I was checking myself out as far as that awareness, you know, and I'm telling you, if you think that way, you're going to be ready, and because it's the old analogy that Mike used, and I've changed it a couple times, but he used the raincoat analogy, and that's like you got to put the raincoat on before you go out in the rain. It doesn't help you after it's been raining. You know, I like to say the parka, because if you're out in the snow, it'll kill you. But you have to have the parka on before the snow, before the cold. So you're going to have, and that's the whole point of it, thinking that everyone's going to attack you. If you think everyone's going to attack you, then you got the parka on. You're wearing the parka. These people are like, I don't want to go around like that. Well, the normal life. Well, yeah, and that's why you would get killed in certain cultures, or you might end up getting killed, because that stuff's not happening to me. Because I'm not letting that happen, because I assume the worst. And I've been in some, you know, I've been in a lot of places, a lot of countries in the world, and I've been in a lot of bad situations in third world countries and in first world countries too. I've been in places people don't want to hang out in, and that's how you do it. And that goes exactly, and that's me putting myself in the situation, but the real situation. But what you're talking about is what you and I went through with Mike, and that is, you were situationally trained. We're going to put you in a situation like, you sink or swim, brother. And I can hear his voice. You know what I mean? You know,
it's really important. And this was on my mind when we were talking off air. It's what you said about putting you in situations where you fail. I remember, this is kind of comical in a way, but I had this Chinese buddy, young guy. I was doing talks at the high school I went to in Collinsville. And after I'd been in 2 years into college at SIUE, my old U.S. history teacher calls me, because we stayed in touch. He was a pretty cool guy. He had lived in Panama, and I met a Panamanian buddy of his, and actually ended up going down and backpacking through the jungle in Panama to Costa Rica. It was quite an adventure back in '74, but in the jungle. That's the first time I realized that, hey, they got freaking crocodiles over here too. They're smaller, but they're nasty little bastards. I didn't even know there were crocodiles in Central America until that experience. But anyway, so one of the things that's interesting is when Mike left East St. Louis, he moved to near the St. Louis U campus in these big apartments called Grand Towers on Grand over here. And so this Chinese kid, the reason I mentioned him is I took him with me, and this is really funny, because when I went back to my old high school when I was a sophomore in college, they asked me to come and do a talk because they had an Asian studies program. So the guy said, hey, you know what? Maybe you could come and do a talk and give these kids some idea to get them fired up about studying this subject. How do all these martial arts from these Asian countries, what do they say about their culture, and how do they develop? So, you know, I whipped out my books and I did a really nice presentation. I get there and they turned 4 classrooms into one with these portable doors. And I've got an English class and an Asian studies, you know, all these, there's like now I thought I was talking to like 30 kids and there's like 150, you know, there's all these kids and stuff. And it was very funny. That's actually kind of a side note, but that's how I met this guy. He was 16 at the time and I was, I guess, 19. So I started training him and he comes over with me to meet Mike one time. And this is like this kid's first class with Mike. Okay, so we're over there, and Mike, he's like, it's the failure thing, right? So what he does, it's like an old kung fu flick. He's got all these guys surround us, you know, and he's like, okay, so these guys are going to attack you, you know. So what do you think happens there? You fail. You fail. I mean, I got lucky a few times because when we first started with Mike, he was still doing like Manta style Kung Fu stuff, you know? And in that Manta style, you had these funny little half turn side kicks that weren't fully extended ones like we started doing later with the Jun Fan. And they were meant to be thrown at closer quarters and you could turn and spin and throw them quicker. You know, they were choppier. That kind of saved my ass for like a couple seconds and then you're in like a Scottish mob fight, you know, or a Russian mob fight, you know, after that. There's just, so point is, Mike wanted to take you to failure. Now, do you think he stood there and told me exactly what I should have done or what would have worked better? Nope. He wanted me to leave there with my tail between my legs, feeling like shit, half pissed, and go think about this for a while and then play with it and then get creative. And I'm telling you, that is like at the root of the kind of process I'm talking about, like what we're going to be doing coming up. And like Christophe's talking about, that just that mentality alone, if you start getting creative, takes you to another place. Now I've figured out ways to do that more effectively because I've done it enough times. Now, one other thing I have to say right here is what you were talking about is thinking about being attacked all the time. I've done that too. What I've found over the years, going back and talking to people, is I frame it a little bit differently. And then I find they're not as resistant. I say, okay, why don't you frame it like this? Practice high-level awareness in all situations. And so you don't have to feel like it's a negative thing or that you're thinking about being attacked all the time. I said, just practice doing this. You're walking around. Try to do what Native Americans used to call scatter vision. And we practice scatter vision all the time. I go, scatter vision is this. Look at someone, but raise your vision a little bit so that you're slightly able to look above their head, but still see their entire body, see their feet, and see everything in your visual field, and do the thumb trick to get your vision to see how far out it goes. And I said, that's how you want to practice looking, all right? And said, practice that all the time. I said, then play a game. I said, CIA trains people like this, I know. Notice what you can notice and how fast you can notice it. Okay, there's a guy over there and he's wearing a yellow raincoat, but his hand's in his right pocket. Oh, that could be a gun. He could be going for his fucking sandwich. Who knows, right? This guy is over here. And I said, turn this into a big ass awareness game. I says, but then allow yourself to feel vibes. What's coming at you, you know? I noticed that guy number 7 over there is, he's staring me down, wondering, who am I, you know? And I said, you just practice this little game. And I said, you'll notice that people can't get the drop on you. When I'm standing in the freaking grocery store, for crying out loud, and I'm focused on the clerk, and I hear or feel something behind me, I immediately just turn slightly to let them know that I know they're there. It's just what you just said a minute ago. You just letting people know that you're aware of them and you're simply there in kind of a neutral but ready way is very disarming on the front end. Because you got most of these guys are, and here's the key phrase, big pussies. They're cowards. If they think that they're going to have a confrontation, most of them don't do it. They're because they feel it. They feel it like this guy's not scared. He's looking right at me. Got maybe a goofy. I like to do the goofy little smile because they might think I'm half freaking psycho. That's actually a systemic trick, by the way, is smiling all the time. Anyway, oops, I gave one away. So So, you know, that in itself, letting people know that you know they're there. But so see, what I do is I turn it into, I don't want to use the word game because it's more serious than that, but a high level awareness practice, you know, and it comes in handy. You know how many accidents I've avoided in cars doing that? I mean, you don't even have to think of it about just being attacked. It saves your ass all kinds of stuff.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can always bring that up because there are other benefits to what we do. There are a lot of other benefits to what we do. As you're improving people's concentration and focus overall, and that can be applied to other aspects. It can be applied to work. It can be applied to being an entrepreneur. It can be applied to women. You know.
You stole it. I was just gonna say, I'll be out with guys, and they miss more babes, hot babes in miniskirts than I ever do because I see them like radar everywhere. I can catch them all. See, so thank you.
Yeah, bro. They got to pay attention. Pay attention. Yeah. Yeah. So I hope you were paying attention to some of the photos I sent you, by the way.
Did you see my message I sent you about 15 minutes before we went on?
Oh, okay. I didn't see.
It had to do with how do they get the soap out of there?
That, you know, that's this thing. I don't know. That's just some sort of. I don't personally think that's. You know, I'm not interested in that. It's like, you know, okay, hot chicks washing a car with their bodies, big deal. You know, it's like.
I know, but it is funny. It's funny, and that's why my message to you is, how do they get the soap out of there?
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't know, but for those of people who don't understand what we're saying, too bad, because we're not going to explain it to you. We're covering some inside stuff here that we're sending each other and babbling to each other. Because the reason why, and the reason why we're doing that is because Ken is trying to get out of St. Louis, and so and move to warmer places and have more adventures. So that's what's up with that. So that's the reason why we're talking. So the point being is that there's reason to go train with him, and whenever he has an opportunity for you, because it's not going to exist forever. That's something that I've always found people. Well, I'll do it next time. Well, hey, guess what? You missed the Who on tour, you know, or the Rolling Stones. I'm just using big names so people, you know, will know them through history. They're still going to be there. You don't get another chance, you know, like it's like, you know, I missed, you know, blah, blah, blah. I mean, yeah, well, you missed them, you know, and the same thing here. So I want people to realize that, because their opportunity to train with you in St. Louis, you know, could end at any time, especially if I influence him much more. Ken will be over here wrestling elephants and stuff, and
in a loincloth.
Yeah, and we'll be harassing Norm from a distance, you know. So that'll be kind of funny. But but to get back to the overall point here is that we are talking about situational training that will lead you to a higher consciousness. I hate to use that word, but that's something that, because people will identify with that higher level of consciousness, of awareness, so that, you know, and here, okay, let's use the old Zen saying that a lot of people have taken now, but they will be awakened, right? I mean, that's really what it was all about, right? You know, you were on the lotus pad, and then the Buddha said, "I am awake." Remember that famous Zen saying? And that's really what we're trying to do with people, is make awake.
Oh, locked up for a minute. I think we're okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think no, that's what I'm talking about. We talked about this offline for a while, about the idea that, you know, people go, how the hell do martial arts have anything to do with we use the word spiritual path or a consciousness expanding path? Well, this is what we're talking about. You know, when you practice awareness at higher levels, it starts physically, and then where else does it go? It goes to more awareness of your own body internally. And the more awareness you have of things, the more you're able to, I'll use the word control or manipulate them on lots of levels, right? I mean, I'm convinced that because of all these practices and all this stuff I've learned in martial arts, it's why I almost never get sick. I feel stuff, I feel subtle things, and I attack them. I'm a cut them off, preemptive strike kind of a guy, you know. I feel and I attack it, and I haven't had. I've only been in the hospital once, and that's when I was born. Now, I've had cracked ribs. I had one that was moving toward a lung. I actually went to a dental school in Illinois and very painfully had the guy that taught anatomy and physiology there shove his fingers into my rib and pull it. I didn't have the money. This was back in the CMAA days, and he got that rib to move so that it wouldn't puncture my lung because I didn't have medical insurance at the time. But that being a side story to the weird shit that we've gone through training and stuff. And I mean, I could have gone to a witch doctor too, probably. But anyway, you know, it's just a thing. I'm just getting at the idea that awareness is awareness. And I even do exercises in my classes to get people to be more subtly aware of, because see, it's important, combat breathing, right? That is crucial. A lot of folks talk about it, but they don't practice it. And I know you know about it. Combat breathing is crucial. That's something that you know, everybody would just say breathe. I'm like, yeah, okay, I would breathe, but there's ways to practice breathing in various kinds of situations. If you want to understand what it means to panic and lose your breath, do a drill that we do. Lay your ass down on the ground. Have 10 guys pile up on top of you, and you'll see what it feels like to panic and start losing your breath. And there's ways. Hickson Gracie knew that trick too. That's why he'd let really much bigger, stronger guys get right on top of him and try to boa constrictor him and squeeze the air out of him, and they couldn't do it because he learned how to breathe in the upper part of his lungs enough to maintain consciousness. Wait till these jackasses gassed out, and then escape, and then beat the shit out of them when they're gassed up. I mean, see, this is brilliant kind of stuff, man. This is the kind of stuff. But I'm talking about learning subtleties of things that it's not just about combat. Combat is a core focus, but there's all these bazillions of other ancillary benefits to your health, to your mental state, that enhance. What's combat training? It's about survival, right? Well, guess what, guys? It's like an onion. There's tons of other layers to survival other than just surviving in combat. But the combat training at higher levels helps affect all these other layers of the survival, not only survival, but expansion of your own consciousness and your sensory abilities beyond what you know you're even capable of. Back to the Zen thing, right? The Japanese, they loved Zen. The samurai loved Zen, right? Because it wasn't about, you know, okay, trying to identify if there's a controlling being named God. No, it was about total connectedness with everything, which is extremely important in a combat situation. This is what we've been talking about, right?
Yeah, well, let me interrupt and say this, because this applies directly as a Zen thing, and exactly what you're talking about. And these may sound like cliches because a bunch of people have probably seen these in martial arts movies and stuff, and people just parrot the phrases. But it's being in the now, being in the now, and that's what you're talking about. If you got a bunch of guys on top of you squeezing the air out of you, you got to be in the now, because focusing on the past or the future is not going to get you out of the now. You got to be in the now. You got to deal with the now, and that's what. Let's put that into the aspect that people get mugged or something, and they're starting to ask questions. Why is this happening to me? Why? What? You know, what did I do? Why are you doing this? Those are the wrong questions. You shouldn't even. You need to be dealing with it. You don't. You can try to analyze it later, but analyzing it's going to get you killed. You know. And this, have you noticed that? There, you can watch all sorts of videos where people are like, "Why are you doing this to me?" And you know, they end up getting stabbed or shot or something. And these are not the questions to be asking. You need to be dealing with the now. You can analyze stuff later, and that's the same thing I tell my guys after I train them and I get them somewhat good. I'm like, no, you don't sing your songs before the battle. You sing them at the campfire afterwards. You know, you have to make it through the battles. Then you get to say how great you are. You know what I mean? You get to sing the songs. But you can't do it beforehand, because if you're busy doing it beforehand, you're done. You know, you can't be out there thinking that you're great after it's over. Then you can tell everyone how great you are. You know, and that was the fun part. That's what Vikings wanted to do, for example. They're not the only ones, but I mean that, and Native American Indian tribes, because that's what we're talking about too. Warrior. We're talking about the warrior thing, right? They would go on vision quests and all these things, all to do what? To put themselves in the awareness that we're talking about, a heightened awareness. And what made them so formidable wasn't that they had superior technology with weapons. It was their superior ability to travel, move, and also be aware of their surroundings and stuff. I mean, you weren't. I mean, Mike, I don't know. Have you been to Arizona and places where Geronimo was at? I mean, my God, there's nowhere to hide. I mean, you could see people coming, they could see you, and for them to fight off a superior army for so long, I mean, that came from within. You know, that came from what we're talking about. That came from, to say this cliche thing, the warrior spirit. But the warrior spirit is exactly, you know, and okay, you know, Ken, right there, you know, I'm thinking just as a way to reach a lot of people and get them to understand things, maybe we should term this warrior spirit training. You know, what you're doing is you're putting them in a position where they're going to get that warrior spirit, right? I mean,
yeah, that's the idea. Yeah.
You know, yeah. I mean, so
we're going way past, you know, dealing with a group coming in. Yeah.
Yeah, I know we are. Well, that's
no, I'm saying this is what, to me, this is perfect. This is what we want to do. People have to see the value of this way beyond, you know, Jesus, you know, can I get my brain and my body to function together in such a way that some schmuck sitting next to me on the Metrolink's not going to get the drop on me and send me to the hospital while he robs me and whatever the hell else, you know? I mean, that's not that hard to get to, but they got to understand that in getting to that place, it opens up a whole new world to get to places above and beyond it. And that's why I'm exactly glad that you're going there. That's they got to see there's benefits way beyond what we're talking about, which is defensive scenarios.
Yeah, I guess, you know, what we're talking about is we'll show you the road, and how far you want to go on the road is up to you, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and
you got to do the work. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm saying, yeah, I'm all about the immediate. I'm all about curing the problems. I'm being a problem solver and also giving people immediate results. I'm all about that. But you and I have both gone through the training, and we both had the background where we know what we know. When you start talking about something, I know what you're talking about. When I talk about something, you know what I'm talking about, because we had the depth there. You know, now not everyone has to go to that depth, but I think we're making people aware that we do have that depth, that we're not just guys out here with Hallmark greeting card philosophy saying stuff. We have the depth because this is what we've done. You know, this is what I've done with my life, and having this knowledge and being able to teach it is something that is a boon to other people, and so that we can save them considerable time. They don't have to take. It's not going to take them. That's the thing. I can train people. I went all over the world and learned stuff because I was obsessed with it. Number one. Number two, I always was looking, is there a better way? Is there a better way? The thing is, like what I do now, I wish I would have found someone like me, which I could never do. Don't know if they existed at all or not during my formative time. But the thing is, what I can do now is I can save people decades of learning from what I can do. And what we're telling you, what we're talking about right now, the warrior spirit training, which I really think that connects with people. Because I'm thinking about how that's going to sound to a lot of people. They're going to be very keyed into warrior spirit training. Yeah, because, and that way you don't limit yourself just to that physical encounter thing. Like we've been talking about, you start getting into the, how does it apply to other aspects of life? What benefits do I get? How far can I pursue it? And it really, and I'm going to say this because this entire time we've been talking, this keeps propping up in my memory. And I'm probably certain that you've read the books, but does this not sound a lot like Castaneda to you?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Oh yeah,
You know,
sure.
you
I
know,
mean,
I
now
mean
I'm
the
really taking a, but yes, it does. Yeah, yeah, you got that right. I'll tell you what else it's like. You said the word, you said it earlier, and you kept going. Vision questing. Now, I'll tell you what. That's a great way to give people a feel for this. Read some Castaneda books. I'm going to tell you another excellent one. Excellent, and this is real stuff right here in current time. Tom Brown Jr. Get the book, The Tracker. Do you know about Tom Brown Jr.?
yeah, you were talking about him before. You were talking about him before, and you're talking about how he was. Yeah, you talked about him. But I don't know if anybody else followed up on what you said or not, though, because I had people.
That's
Because
why I'm
sometimes
saying
people ask.
this guy grew up in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. People don't realize there's a huge wilderness area in New Jersey called the Pine
Yeah,
Barrens.
there is. There's.
He lived on the outskirts of that area. And he used to play in the woods, man. He was fascinated by nature in the woods and running around. And he runs into another kid. I think he was 8 years old at the time. Another kid who happened to be like a full-blooded Apache kid. And his name was Rick. So his name wasn't Apache, but okay, so Rick. This kid's the same way, and they become friends. And this kid says, my grandfather knows more about the woods than anybody alive. So Tom gets to meet this kid's grandfather, and this guy's name was Stalking Wolf, full-blooded Apache, maybe one of the last alive, who had gone through the full Apache training to become a tracker. I mean, this is an intricate blend of the highest level wilderness survival skills integrated with combative skills, integrated with spiritual vision questing, all rolled up into one package. And Tom Brown and his buddy Rick actually got killed a few years later in riding a horse accident. But Rick stayed with Stalking Wolf. I'll jump to the beginning of the end. The beginning of the end with his training with Stalking Wolf was when he was 18, he says, okay, it's time for your little test now. Told Tom to meet him at the edge of the forest. Now, and this isn't a made-up shit. This is totally 100% true event. Tom Brown was on talk radio shows forever about this, all right? Tom Brown Jr. became one of the most sought-after trackers in missing persons cases for decades. I don't know if he still does it or not. He's getting older now, but this guy was very well known for a long time. So here was the test. Okay, Tom, take off your clothes. Stripped him naked. No clothes, no knife, no nothing. I'll see you here in a year. He sent him into the
year.
A year.
1 year.
1 year. Tom goes into, and Tom's first book, The Tracker, tells the story, tells this whole story. And then his subsequent books get very interesting and fascinating because he goes further and further into the whole warrior spirit mentality training.
What we're talking about.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, that's why I brought it up. Exactly what we're talking about. You guys go get these Tom Brown books and you'll really have an insight into the process that we're talking about. Tom even went further. He created survival books that to this day are some of the most fascinating, intricate books. Even if you found yourself homeless in an urban environment, brilliant stuff that this guy came up with, like even how to selectively pick food out of dumpsters to know what's you can eat and what you can't eat, and how to get into a vacant building and bleed water from not only water heaters, which is a common survival thing, but also from old radiators, and how to purify that water with natural objects. I mean, this guy has the most intricate survival books you could imagine. He went and did the same thing that he did with Stalking Wolf. He went and repeated that in different environments. He went up and did it like in Maine, and he went and did it out in the desert, and he repeated this over and over in different environments. I mean, this guy became the quintessential true expert. I mean, he made Bear Grylls look like a little sissy wissy because this guy didn't have a camera crew following him, and he didn't have. I mean, this guy really went out and did all this stuff and damn near died. One of the times he almost died, a grizzly bear attacked him. I think it was like at a trailhead. He had a Jeep. The bear attacked him, and he was under the Jeep, and the bear, it was like turning the Jeep over, lifting it up and stuff. The guy nearly got killed by a grizzly bear on one of his crazy adventures, but he even tested how long he could go without without food. He tested how long he could go without water. Would get to the brink of death. I mean, this guy really did it. You guys, you want to really learn some stuff with some detail, check out Tom Brown Jr. I kid you not. It's great stuff, and it'll lead you into what we're talking about.
Yeah,
now, there's other ways to do it. There's other ways to do it, but this was an extreme example.
Yeah. Well, you know, and the thing is, like, everybody that is involved in this sort of subject or topic is going to do something a little bit different, because obviously that guy is going to know more than we do on survival, you know. But we're going to kick his ass if it ever comes to a fight. I mean, that's, you know, I mean,
that's in there too, and very realistic type of training. Now, but that wasn't his core emphasis like it has been for us.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. I mean, you know,
it was not ignored. It was a crucial aspect to the whole thing.
I know, but I'm saying, you know, this is my major. You know what I'm saying?
I know. That was his minor. I'm with you there.
Yeah. So, you know,
underestimate your opponent, as they say, right?
Yeah. You know, and I don't know why that reminded me of Big Head, but Big Head, you know, you're not going to be able to get over to the taco van. It's not going to work in the survival situation. So,
man, leave that poor kid alone. You're going to give him a complex.
Oh yeah, he should have one. He's busy posting stuff about how he's Elvis reincarnated and stuff. You know, I mean, no.
Oh, really? I didn't read that stuff. I know he's got an Elvis thing. Fixation.
Yeah, he's always had an Elvis. He's always had an Elvis. Yeah, we're just.
Did you screw with his head and let him know that all that time you were in Memphis is when you were touring with him as his keyboard player? Did you tell him that? Did you?
No, I didn't tell him that. But I don't know. He likes to go fishing or something, which I can't stand. You know, I'm not interested in that. And, anyway, I just bring that up because I think that he watches. I don't know if he has the gumption to make it through our entire videos, but I know he watches parts of them now and then. But the aspect of this is that, okay, so I'm going to recap because we've hit so many tangents. And so basically what we've done is we started out with what Ken is going to do in his workshop coming up. And that's situational training, and situational training to make you aware of the tactical gap. Those are my phrases, but they apply. Tactical gap of what do you do from your normal training to things that you haven't been trained for. That's so covering the tactical gap. And from the tactical gap, we started talking about all the other things that you can gain, the benefits from doing this sort of training, and how this training can expand and become more than just these one level situational drills or problems, really situational problems, that you go on to other things. And then we started talking about our own experiences with different things we've done, and start talking about other cultures and people who've done this warrior type of training. Yeah, and there's a guy there's a guy named Gary O'Neill, by the way, speaking of people with O'Neill name. Gary O'Neill, famous Ranger. He's also with the Special Forces, but he had a long career in the Army. I mean, massive. He lied about his age, went in when he was 15, got found out 2 years later, got kicked out, but then he was able to basically pay someone off to pull up his draft numbers during Vietnam to get recalled to the Army and stuff, and then did stuff where that he could, because you have to be a volunteer to get into certain things like Special Forces and things. And anyway, that guy's career is incredible. He's done so much stuff. But one of the things I bring him up because he did a lot of this on his own time. He was half Indian, but he never really knew exactly which Indian tribe that his mother was from and stuff. So he went around to different Indians all over the United States and would go to their powwows and got invited to things. And he actually did the you know, the Sundance, you know,
yeah,
the thing.
That's pretty extreme. I know some people who do it. Yeah.
Where they skewer you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah. Yeah, he did the full 3 days, several times. He did 3 days full, you know, several times, which is exactly what we're talking about. You hallucinate. You're not eating. You get people come by and they give you some water, but you dance, basically dance yourself into hallucinations. And yeah, as you've been cured. That movie Horse, man, the man named Horse, right? That's it, I think. Yeah, that shows that sun dance thing we're talking about. Anyway, he went through all that stuff, and all of that was to get to make himself better at war. He did all that stuff. So, you know, I mean, this guy lived through loads of things. I mean, loads of things. He was tortured in Central America. They killed his family. He was in Vietnam for a really long time. He did. I mean, this guy. You can read about him, Gary O'Neill. He's a famous. I knew people when I was in the Army. I knew people who had known him, but I never got to meet him. I never met him. But anyway, so my point with all that is we're just trying to give you examples. We're not the only ones who cover this subject. There are other people who cover the subject, but our slant on it is to make you safer. That's what we're immediately going for, to make you safer in a bad situation. And then you can, if you want to, continue going and get this esoteric Zen-like thing and start talking about the benefits of the quieted mind, right? You know, reflect the moon in the still waters. You know, all these things come to me, and they sound so cliche because so many people have said them, but they're actually very accurate to what we're talking about. I mean, that what you're talking about is exactly trying to get that calm water to reflect the moon. Is exactly what you're talking about initially when you were talking about, you know, it's going to be hard. The breathing, everything about the breathing and all that stuff, because everybody's going to hold their breath. That's one of the things that everybody does when if you're panicked, scared, or if you're trying to exert yourself, like to lift something heavy, you're going to hold your breath. And most people cannot hold their breath for a minute. I'm serious, unless they've been training. They can't do it, and they are in oxygen debt, hugely in oxygen debt. And normal people never train when they're in oxygen debt, which is something we can do in training, which you probably have done with certain people. I mean, you got to make sure they're healthy and things, but there's all sorts of, and that's the things you do in the military too. You put them in horrible.
Well, you know, the first place I did it actually was back in the 70s when I got certified to dive.
Oh yeah, yeah.
For free diving. It's really funny because the same breathing exercises that we used back then, there's a lot of modified versions of them that exist within combat breathing approaches that are very similar, because it's not only breathing with oxygen debt, it's breathing with oxygen debt while you still have to perform a task. So that's
well, you did you have to do that open lake dive, right, where you take off all the stuff.
Basic scuba certification for that. Yeah, but I did more advanced dive training too. I never got my dive master cert, but I did get to the point where I was able to teach in the 70s. It's one of the reasons that a Navy SEAL, UDT SEAL officer back in the early 70s called me and invited me to lunch at the SIUE Student Center, trying to talk to me about opportunities in the Navy, because they were going through records and he saw that I was a very young certified instructor at the time, and it kind of fit a profile of independent kind of thinkers, and I already had some martial art background and grappling and running. And it's interesting how those guys look for certain personality types that they try to talk you into getting into the military, that maybe you've got the right stuff a little down the road. Those guys were like getting desperate trying to get people in their programs. You know, it's interesting though how they'll profile you, right? Because they see certain skill sets at an age where not many people have. But yeah, and in fact, what I went back to after all those years, you could be a fat, out of shape slob and easily scuba dive these years with a heart condition, because the equipment does it all for you. You know, you can achieve neutral buoyancy just like going. They got all these fancy computerized dive computers and now to plan out your repetitive dives and all that shit. Shit, we had to use old U.S. Navy dive tables to plan our repetitive dives to make sure we weren't going to build up so much nitrogen that we're come up and you got the bends and you know all that shit. I mean, it got very sophisticated, but by the time it got to that, I decided, you know what? I did a mixed gas dive in the Cayman Trench in the 80s. I've done a lot of crazy dive shit. Finally realized, you know what? I think I'm going back to, like, I'm going to be a freaking human dolphin again, which is how I started. Free diving, mask, fins, maybe a snorkel, and you go back to free diving, because that's when you get some exercise, and that's when you have to maintain skills, you know. And that's what I went back to. And when I did, I went back to that at a higher level, learning much better how to breathe and train myself.
Yeah, I got interested in the free diving, the ultimate free diving one, where there's, for people who don't know what we're talking about, free diving is when you hold your breath, and there are different competitions. One is like horizontal. You're only a couple feet under the water, but you try to see how far you can go horizontally. But the extreme one is that you grab onto a weighted sled, and it drags you down, and then you go down, and you're supposed to stop and be checked at certain level of feet down, and then you go down as far as you can go down, and then come up. And many people have died. They tried to ban it for a while because many people died. They die on the way back up. You know, they don't die. They didn't die on the way down. They die on the way back up, either from lungs exploding or just over hypoxia. Because those, I mean, the breathing techniques, and I tried it for a little while. I didn't keep it up or anything that those guys do. But I mean, those guys are holding their breath for like over 5 minutes. Some of those guys can hold their breath, which is insane. I mean, just try to hold your breath, and that's not being pulled underwater under pressure, which as you know, yeah. I mean, it's the only sport in the world where you don't breathe, which is pretty, you know, that's their calling card, you know. That's the but you can look it up. You can look up the world records and stuff about that. It's insanity how deep those guys have gone. I mean, Jesus, like 300 feet or something, you know. It's like it's insanity. It's because you get a what?
That's extreme, crazy stuff. But it does test the limits of. It's good for people to realize that there are pretty amazing things that you can do, you know, with breathing. It's just, I think what we're really talking about here is we're back to how important breathing is, period. And there's a lot of things you can do, and it's like one of the first major key components to surviving that whole physiological thing that happens to you when you get afraid and you lock up and you stop breathing. That will undo tons of physical fitness. You can be the most fit guy in the world, but man, if the fear triggers the cessation of your breath, I don't care how strong you are, you're going down. You know, you got to breathe.
Well, yeah, and to put it into a succinct way, actually, I guess here is that when you've been training, and this is the thing, people train relaxed. You know, everyone, when you, like, the whole point of like going to grappling or going to boxing or kickboxing or whatever, Muay Thai, is to relax, and so you try to train relaxed and stuff. So people are okay, you know, they can kick the bags, they can hit the pads, this, that, and other thing. Yeah, but now suddenly you're fighting a person. And what do? They hold their breath. And in a real situation where it's not planned and you don't know what's coming, you're going to hold your breath, and then you're going to find out that your training never included holding your breath.
That's right.
And so you're done. You're done. You're like, how come I can do 10 rounds on a bag, but when this happens, I'm done in a minute? Because you didn't train like that, which is another secret. I'm giving out a secret. But so that's what you find. I mean, that's what I find with guys who are like, oh, I do sport fighting. You're not ready for war fighting. You know, doing sports is not war fighting. You're not, for a mortal encounter, you're not ready, because the stakes are so much higher. You're gonna hold your breath. You're gonna freeze up, and you're gonna hold your breath. And you got to be able to. You need to be there beforehand. You know, you don't need to be in that territory the first time when it's your life's. You need to be there before, and that's the whole point of what you're doing with the situational problem-solving drills, which gets us back to the workshop. So anyway, this workshop is full. but you're going to be thinking about another one when in June. Is that what you're thinking, or what?
I'm thinking I'm going to see how this list continues to build. Because I'm gonna have to have at least, and this isn't a big number, but it is considering the space we're in. Right now, I've got 15 that'll be in this thing on the 5th. It filled up fast. I got up to one slot really quick. So as soon as I have 10, I'll officially pick the date, which will probably be in June for the follow-up. I already am pretty sure some of these guys, like I mentioned, you really need to do 4, 5, 6 of these things in a year, and it'll really be in you. So chances are some people will repeat. So I think there's a good chance there'll be another one in June quickly. Actually, I've just had a couple guys that are willing to pay me to go ahead and actually next weekend do an accelerated version of it, because they've had a little bit of this in the past. So I just added another preemptive workshop, but it's a private one, just open to a few guys. So yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that's cool. So anyway, we've covered a million things, but they have a central theme, which is covering this unknown area that is not covered. It's not covered in normal martial arts classes. I hate that term. Not covered in MMA, not covered in boxing, not covered in kickboxing, and it's a tactical gap. I mean, that's really that's what it is. A tactical gap, and there are people out there who know about it, who realize that there's a tactical gap, and they're trying to cure it. So Ken workshop is filled up, but hey, guess what? You can contact me, or you can write underneath if you want to, or send email or messages like you have been, people, and let me know, and then interest will drive more. And of course, I do this stuff a lot. Actually, this is what I do. I do this sort of training for people, and we go into not only the situation, but how do you conquer the situation too, not just survive the situation. And that, of course, I do that at many places in the world, and I'm going to probably be available. I got to say this. I got to take time to say this one thing, though. A lot of people don't realize that in the United States, everything, I was just there. It is so expensive in the United States for anything. You're spending over $100 a day on a motel, and you're eating, and it depends on how much you eat, of course, but you're spending over 20 bucks eating, and then you're renting a car, unless you live right there. You're renting a car, and you have to drive, so you got another $400 or $500 in that on top of what you're doing, and that's all the expenses you got to do just to do a training, a seminar, or a camp, or whatever. All that goes away if you come here, because the cost of all that are 1/10 of what they are in the United States. So people are like, it's a long way. Yeah, it's the flight. That's it. Because when you're here, the costs for eating and staying are nothing. Are nothing compared to what you spend in one day in the United States would go over a week here. So I need to educate people on that, because a lot of people, look, I'm not in a Winnebago and I'm not on tour. It takes planning, and people have to commit for me to go to different places. So coming here to the jungle, which is also, I live in a what do you call it, a tourist destination that's well known in the world, so there's other things to do. You can combine it with, there's tigers, tigers, elephants, monkeys here, waterfalls, and all sorts of stuff. Not lions. I don't know why I said that. No lions. There are crocodiles, though. There are crocodiles. So all that's here, and nobody, like, for example, nobody plans their trip to go to Iowa, but a lot of people plan the trip to go to Thailand, so you can add Thailand trip and also get skills. I just want to say that, because I have a lot of people who are like, it's like you're not thinking of it in the total package price. You got to think of the total package, not just the distance. It's not about that. But anyway, okay, so that's what's said. And Ken is on Facebook, and O'Neill, what is it? Systems?
Marshall, I'll put this up too right now. Just this. Can you see that?
His phone number.
I just got a new landline because I need to separate a lot of the calls that I get from guys for this from my fancy smartphone is paid for by a company that I work for. So this is actually I'm on a landline again for the first time in forever with basic voicemail on it. So this is really a better way to get me. I'm pretty busy through the day. So there it is.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to order him a bunch of pizzas, now I guess you know where to send it. That used to be the big.
Send me broccoli. I got to stop with that other stuff.
Okay. But anyway,
these days,
anyway, we covered a lot. So basically, you know, we're not getting paid to do this. We're giving this out as information to let people know about other opportunities, to let them know about us again. Let millennials with their poor research skills have a chance to understand us. And, you know, because they don't, you know, anything before 2010, what, you know? So, and then someone's going to say something, they're going to talk about 2008 or something, you know, oh, wow. But we do that for that aspect. So replay this, and I don't edit this stuff because basically I could and make it more succinct and very pointed for people, but, you know, we're not getting any remuneration for this. So I'm just keeping this stuff raw. You know, everything we've done so far has been pretty raw, unscripted, and that way you know that you're getting the truth from us. We're not concocting a bunch of lies, and we're not working on some sort of involved rehearsal here. We do all these things just right off the top of our head, basically, and I think we're pretty good. We're pretty good at it.
We both have so much stuff in us from all the things we've done that, unless we were following a very professional script because we're getting paid, I think you guys are benefiting from this free flow that we do, because you probably are actually getting a lot more information this way than if we were for commercial purposes. We'd be even more careful. A lot of little tidbits are slipping out there for you.
Actually too much, you know. Yeah, really.
You guys could read 30 books based on just stuff that's popped out of our mouths in the last hour, you know. So if you want some, we just gave them to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, so I guess we're going to go off the air here. Hang out for a second there, Ken. I want to bring something else up. But anyway, so, okay, check out fluentfighting.com. That's one of my main website. And then also combat-judo.com. I'm on Facebook. My name, Christophe Clugston. And then also I have several groups: Tiger Clan, Weapon Fighters, Combat Judo. I've got my page, Clugston Combat Systems. So check those out. Like the pages, people. I have to do that. I have to start making notice about social media, because that's where it's at, you know. And obviously you've seen this on YouTube. So subscribe to the channel. I know my channel's weird because I got language stuff and I got fighting stuff. But the way YouTube is nowadays, I'm not going to divide it, because it's really difficult now to get so I've had this channel for a long time, so it means it's got some sort of respect to YouTube at this point. But if I were to start over a new channel, then I'm not going to have any respect by their standards, so it would be very slow. So you know, if you like the language stuff, watch the language stuff. If you like the fighting stuff, watch the fighting stuff. And you know, you don't have to like both of them, but that's what I do. So anyway, all right. So we'll talk to you again soon, because we got as you know, Ken and I have a million things to say, and you should be listening. It's for your own good. But okay, so we're gonna cut it off, and we'll talk to you very soon. See ya.
See you guys.